There are many typefaces that we have to deal with as typographers and designers, and the general classification that we can put all these typefaces in, this is very, very general, is serif and sans serif. That's sans, S-A-N-S, that's French for none, so serif and non-serif. So what the heck is a serif? You probably know, but I'll go over it. This is an example of a serif typeface. There's like these little hooks on the letter forms, and in the anatomy video I mentioned their little hooks are leftovers from handwriting and calligraphy. If we look at this next cell here, I circled some but not all of the serifs. So like let's look at the letter R here, that little hook leading into the letter R, these little they look like little feet at the base of the letter form. Those are serifs. A sans serif typeface looks very clean, modern. In fact, there's the sans serif typeface really didn't come into its own until like sometime around the 1920s. So it's a pretty recent addition to the culture. There's lots of ways to classify typefaces in a finer way, and not every expert agrees. Remember that typeface is not a science, it's an art form, and it's a craft, it's a skill. So every typographer you talk to is going to have a different opinion, and this is simply the classification system used by a book called Designing with Type by James Craig, which is used here at Tri-C as a textbook, and it's a good book, and this is a fine place to start. So there's, according to this system of James Craig's, there's old style, transitional, modern, Egyptian or slab serif, and sans serif. So let's take a look at examples of each. An old style typeface, and the example is Garamond, has these very angled strokes. You can see like the W has these overlapping V's to it, sharp slants on the serifs, a small X height. The other old style examples here, I'll have this PDF on Blackboard, but are Centaur, Gaudi, Bembo, Minion Pro. So the let's see, the character, the feeling that a person gets when looking at an old style typeface is that it's a little bit old-fashioned, formal. It's been around for a while. There's I wouldn't say an elegance to it. It's more like a traditional. I don't know. The word over here, venerable, is a very good one, meaning it's very, it looks very respectable. So let's go to the next one. The transitional typeface. The guys who were designing these typefaces did not consider themselves transitional designers. It was just in retrospect that we named them. This is a transition from the old style to the modern times. Baskerville is a very good example of the transitional typeface. The thing that's to look for is like there's not that much contrast between thicks and thin strokes. It's there, but we'll see in the next, as we go forward into the modern typefaces, that contrast gets even more pronounced. The words that we associate with transitional typefaces, level-headed, rational. Rational is a very good one. Baskerville would be a wonderful typeface to use like in an English textbook, for example. The modern typeface, now for us folks in art and design, modern has a specific meaning. The modern era really started, believe it or not, like the mid 1600s, early 1700s. The good example for modern is Bodoni. Century School Book is a wonderful example. Dido is a beautiful typeface. Glamour is a good word to associate with the modern typefaces. There's a big contrast between thicks and thins here, and this relates directly to the technology available. Like, they're able to cut steel finer and finer and make more thinner, more inks, and print press technology increase where they could print thin lines very clearly. So you can see, like, for example, the lowercase e has that very thin lower part of the hook there, and a really thick horizontal. So that's one way to identify modern typefaces, these high contrast between thicks and thins. The word Egyptian is what the author David Craig uses. Slab serif is a much better term. Slab serif meaning, in general, that the serif is about the same width as the horizontals. So if we look at the word slab serif here on this cell here, it's a better, like, look at the lowercase l on the word slab. You can see that the little feet, the little base that the lowercase l is sitting on, is almost the same width as the horizontal L. That's how you identify a slab serif. This was used a lot in posters during the Victorian era, which would be the late 1800s. So and it's coming back. If you go on the Plain Dealer website, Plain Dealer uses slab serif quite a bit. It's very strong, very bold kind of look to it. Lastly, we have the sans serif, and you can say sans serif is fine. Don't pronounce the S. But in America, you can say sans serif. I say it all the time. French is sans serif, if you want to be fancy, smancy, and sometimes you can say like Gil Sans is a example. That's perfectly okay to pronounce Gil Sans as Sans in America. The big example is Helvetica. It's the most popular typeface in the world, really. You've seen it everywhere, like on street signs, signs in front of, the Arte bus. It's Helvetica. So very simple, minimalist. Of course, this is what we see all the time on the internet. The sans serif, very clean, and typically used for headings, subheadings, that kind of thing. There's a general rule of thumb that you use a sans serif typeface for titles, and you use a serif typeface for body text, because apparently these serif typefaces are easier to read. It's kind of a cultural thing. We're so used to sans serif that it's become very readable. I've seen books set entirely in sans serif typefaces, and I'm sure you probably have too. So those are the 4 or 5 general typefaces. And let me back up here. The main thing I want you to take away from this is that there are typefaces, and each typeface has its own particular character. Okay. For example, just look at this cell. Look at the words "old style," which is written in an old style typeface. Now, would you, if you had to write a textbook on computer hardware, would you set it in old style? Well, no, of course you would not. No. If you were setting a book of Old English poetry, would you use Egyptian or slab serif? No, it would look hideous. Okay, if you had like Shakespeare set in the slab serif typeface, it just does not fit. So, for example, like if you were doing an ad for perfume, I think modern would look very, very good. If you're doing something for a title for Glamour magazine, modern would look very good. So the when you pick a typeface, the typeface has its own like soul and character to it, and that's one thing that you're going to kind of be exposed to as you go forward in typography. That not all typefaces are equal, and they're not applied the same way. And we'll get more into that as the semester goes on.